at home, but became Urdhva Reta, or Nastika brahmacharis, unadulterated celibates. Yes. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The system of brahmacharya has been current since the birth of Brahma. A section of the population, especially male, did not marry at all. Instead of allowing their semen to be driven downwards, they used to lift the semen up to the brain. They are called Urdhva Ritasha, those who lift up. Semen is so important that if, by the yogic process, one can lift the semen up to the brain, he can perform wonderful work. One's memory is enabled to act very swiftly, and the duration of life is increased. Yogis can perform all kinds of austerity with steadiness and be elevated to the highest perfectional stage, even to the spiritual world. Vivid examples of brahmacharis who accepted this principle of life are the four sages, Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara, as well as Narada and others. Another significant phrase here is Naiti Grihan Ki Avasan. They did not live at home. Griha means home as well as wife. In fact, home means wife. Home does not mean a room or a house. One who lives with a wife lives at home. Otherwise, a sannyasi or a brahmachari, even though he may live in a room or in a house, does not live at home. That they did not live at home means that they did not accept a wife, and so there was no question of their discharging semen. Semen is meant to be discharged when one has a home, a wife, and the intention to beget children. Otherwise, there is no injunction. There is no injunction for discharging semen. These principles were followed from the beginning of creation, and uh, such brahmacharis never created progeny. This narration has dealt with the descendants of Lord Brahma from Manu's daughter Prasuti. Prasuti's daughter was Dakshayani, or Sati, in relation to whom the story of the Daksha Yajna was narrated. Maitreya is now explaining about the progeny of the sons of Brahma. Out of the many sons of Brahma, the brahmachari sons headed by Sanaka and Narada did not marry at all, and therefore there was no question of narrating the history of their descendants. Text number 2. Another son of Lord Brahma was Irreligion, whose wife's name was Falsity. From their combination were born two demons named Damba, or bluffing, and Maya, or cheating. These two demons were taken by a demon named Anivriti, who had no children. It is understood herein that Adharma, irreligion, was the son of Brahma, and he married his sister Mrisha. This is the beginning of sex life between brother and sister, which is a horrible thing. This unnatural combination of sex life can be possible in human society only when there is adharma, or irreligion. It is understood that in the beginning of creation, Brahma created not only saintly sons like Sanaka, Sanatana, and Narada, but also demoniac offspring like Nibriti, Adharma, Damba, and Falsity. Everything was created by Brahma in the beginning. Regarding Narada, it is understood that because his previous life was very pious and his association very good, he was born as Narada. Others were also born in their own capacities according to their backgrounds. The law of karma continues. The law of karma continues birth after birth, when there is a new creation, the same karma comes back with the living entities. They are born in different capacities according to karma, even though their father was originally Brahma, who is the exalted qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text number 3. Maitreya told Vidura, O great soul, from Damba and Maya were born greed and nikriti, or cunning. From their combination came children named Krodha, anger, and Himsa, envy. And from their combination were born Kali and his sister Duruki, harsh speech. Text 4. O greatest of all men, by the combination of Kali and harsh speech were born children named Mrityu, death, and Biti, fear. From the combination of Mrityu and Biti came children named Yatana, excessive pain, and Niraya, hell. Text 5. My dear Vidura, I have summarily explained the causes of devastation. One who hears this description 3 times attains piety and washes the sinful contamination from his soul. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The creation takes place on the basis of goodness, but devastation takes place because of irreligion. That is the way of material creation and devastation. Here it is stated that the cause of devastation is adharma, or irreligion. The descendants of irreligion and falsity, born one after another, are bluffing, cheating, greed, cunning, anger, envy, quarrel, harsh speech, death, fear, severe pain, and hell. All these descendants are described as signs of devastation. If a person is pious and hears about these causes of devastation, he will feel hatred for all these, and that will cause his advancement in a life of piety. Piety refers to the process of cleansing the heart. As recommended by Lord Chaitanya, one has to cleanse the dust from the mirror of the mind, and then advancement on the path of liberation begins. Here also, the same process is recommended. Malam means contamination. We should learn to despise all the causes of devastation, beginning from irreligion and cheating. And then we shall be able to make advancement in a life of piety. The possibility of our attaining Krishna consciousness will be easier, and we shall not be subjected to repeated devastation. The present life is repeated birth and death. But if we seek the path of liberation, we may be saved from repeated suffering. Text number 6. Maitreya continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, I shall now describe before you the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, who was born of a part of a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Brahma is a powerful expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Brahma is Jiva Tattva, he is empowered by the Lord and therefore is considered a plenary expansion of the Supreme Godhead. Sometimes it happens that when there is no suitable living being to be empowered to act as Brahma, the Supreme Lord himself appears as Brahma. Brahma is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Swayambhuva Manu and Swayambhuva Manu was a direct son of Brahma. The great sage Maitreya is now going to explain about the descendants of this Manu, all of whom were widely celebrated for their pious activities. Before speaking on these pious descendants, Maitreya has already described the descendants of impious activities, representing anger, envy, palatable speech, quarrel, fear, and death. Purposefully, therefore, he has not mentioned the history of the life of Dhruva Maharaj, the most pious king within this universe. Okay, text number 7. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons by his wife, Satarupa, and the names of the sons were Uttanapada and Priyavrata. Because both of them were descendants of a plenary expansion of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were very competent to rule the universe, to maintain and protect the citizens. Purport: it is said that these 2 kings, Uttanapada and Priyavrata, were specifically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unlike the great king Rishabha, who was the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Rishabha, yeah.
Rishabhadev,
Yeah. Text number 8. King Uttanapada had 2 queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Uttanapada had 2 queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The great sage Maitreya wanted to describe the pious activities of the kings. Priyavata was the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, and Uttanapada was the second. But the great sage Maitreya immediately began to speak of Dhruva Maharaj, the son of Uttanapada, because Maitreya was very eager to describe pious activities. The incidents in the life of Dhruva Maharaj are very attractive for devotees. From his pious activities, one can learn how one can detach himself from material possessions and how one can enhance one's devotional service by severe austerities and penances. By hearing the activities of pious Dhruva, one can enhance one's faith in God and can directly connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus, one can very soon be elevated to the transcendental platform of devotional service. The example of Dhruva Maharaj's austerities can immediately generate a feeling of devotional service in the hearts of the hearts. Text 9. Once upon a time, King Uttanapada was patting the son of Suruchi. Uttama placed him on his lap. Dhruva Maharaj was also trying to get on the king's lap, but the king did not very much welcome him. While the child, Dhruva Maharaj, was trying to get on the lap of his father, Suruchi, his stepmother, became very envious of the child, and with great pride she began to speak so as to be heard by the king himself. Purport: the king, of course, was equally affectionate towards both his sons, Uttama and Dhruva. So he had a natural inclination to take Dhruva as well as Uttama on his lap, but because of his favoritism towards his queen Suruchi, he could not welcome Dhruva Maharaj despite his feelings. King Uttarapada feeling was understood by Suruchi, and therefore with great pride she began to speak about the king's affection for her. This is the nature of women. If a woman understands that her husband regards her as a favorite, as especially affectionate to her, she takes undue advantage. These symptoms are visible even in such an elevated society as the family of Swayambhuva. Therefore, it is concluded that the feminine nature of women is present everywhere. Text 11. Queen Suruchi told Dhruva Maharaj, "My dear son, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take your birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap." Oh, that's not a nice thing to say, a bad thing.
Mhm.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Queen Suruchi very proudly informed Guru Maharaj that to be the king's son was not the qualification for sitting on the lap or throne of the king. Rather, this privilege was dependent on one's having taken birth from her womb. In other words, she indirectly informed Dhruva Maharaj that although he happened to be born of the king, he was considered an illegitimate son because of his birth from the womb of the other queen. Well, there it is. Text 12. My dear child, you are unaware that you were born not of my womb, but of silver woman, but of another woman, I'm sorry. Therefore, you should know that your attempt is doomed to failure. You are trying to fulfill a desire which is impossible to fulfill. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The small child, Dhruva Maharaj, was naturally affectionate toward his father, and he did not know that there was a distinction between his two mothers. This distinction was pointed out by Queen Suruchi, who informed him that since he was a child, he did not understand the distinction between the two queens. This is another statement of Queen Suruchi's pride. Text 13. If you at all desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities. First of all, you must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. And then, when you are favored by him because of such worship, you shall have to take your next birth from my womb. Purport by Srila Prabhupada.
Sure.
Suruchi was so envious of Dhruva Maharaj that she indirectly asked him to change his body. According to her, first of all, he had to die, then take his next body in her womb, and only then would it be possible for Dhruva Maharaja to ascend the throne of his father. Well, more or less, she's saying something that's impossible to do, and it's very insulting. So let's see what Dhruva Maharaj is going to do.
But what was surprising here is that she still pointed him to get the favor of the Lord.
Yeah, she's giving him some good advice. Yeah,
Yes, that's probably why her name is still Suruchi. Most of the times,
Ruchi.
yeah,
Suruchi means better.
better taste.
Yeah.
The names reflect either there in some goodness.
Yeah. Text number 14. The sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, as a snake, when struck by a stick, breathes very heavily, Dhruva Maharaj, having been struck by the strong words of his stepmother, began to breathe very heavily because of great anger. When he saw that his father was silent and did not protest, he immediately left the palace and went to his mother. Well, you see, these are uh, sons of a great father, and even though they're so young, but still they have strong, let's say, identities.
Hmm.
So Dhruva Maharaj is very, very, even though he's so young, it's still, he is, let's say, someone that is not going to take this very nicely. He feels as if he's been uh, insulted. And it says he began to breathe very heavily. That means he's really angry because of great anger. And when he saw that his father was silent and did not protest, he immediately left the palace and went to his mother. When Dhruva Maharaj reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger, and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while the palace residents, who had heard all the harsh words of Suruchi, related everything in detail. Thus, Suniti also became greatly aggrieved. While there's a difference between being aggrieved and being angry, there's a subtle difference. Aggrieved means she feels very bad, uh, but she's not necessarily angry. This incident was unbearable to Suniti's patience. She began to burn as if in a forest fire. And in her grief, she became just like a burnt leaf and so lamented. As she remembered the words of her co-wife, her bright lotus-like face filled with tears, and thus she spoke. Well, you see, she's not, it doesn't sound like she's going to be envious or like a snake, and bite. She just feels really bad, right, that her son is being treated like this by the co-wife. Report. When a man is aggrieved, he feels exactly like a burnt leaf in a forest fire. Suniti's position was like that. Although her face was as beautiful as a lotus flower, it dried up because of the burning fire caused by the harsh words of her co-wife. Now, see, that's a very important statement, significant statement. Now you see how a person who uses harsh words can really devastate another person.
Hmm.
And although her face was as beautiful as a lotus flower, it dried up because of the burning fire caused by the harsh words of her co-wife. So really, anyone who uses harsh language, that's actually a very demoniac quality. It's unnecessary. But some people can't control themselves, so they use harsh language. She also was breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, my dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain. Well, now that's very significant uh, wisdom that she's giving to her son. She doesn't want him to become, what do they call it, Budla, full of revenge. She wants him to remain, saintly.
Don't wish for anything inauspicious.
Yeah. So it says, anyone who inflicts pains on others suffers himself from that pain. So that very important statement, we should take notice of that. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself. These are the laws of karma. So we should never inflict pains upon other people. Otherwise, we will suffer from that pain also. Suniti said, my dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so, because the king, your father, does not consider me his wife or even his maidservant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore, it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, you have grown up. Well, you see, even in ancient times, there was, what you would call these very, uh, very passionate behaviors, and uh, it's not very nice. Let's put it like that. It's like uh, children being, uh, let's say, ignored. Although his mother has love for him, but his stepmother is really being mean, and it's disturbing him. And the stepmother can't really do anything. I'm not the stepmother, but the other mother, his mother, his birth mother, can't really do anything because the husband, who has uh, different wives, has one wife that he likes more than other wife. And let's see, this is the problem with having more than one wife. These are the these are the pastimes of men who get married to several wives. There was a devotee who had two wives, and he used to come to Mangala Arati holding hands with both wives, and he was very proud of it. Right? You know what happened? It turned out that his two wives became lesbians and threw him out of the house. That's that really happened. He used to come holding hands with both wives to the temple. And then eventually they became lesbians and threw him out of the house, which was good. Actually, it was mercy. Teach him a lesson having two wives. Okay, text number 19. My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother, Uttama, then then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshiping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So his stepmother actually gave him good advice. And his mother validated that advice. So even in dire situations, sometimes you can get good advice even from your enemy, right? So in this case, the stepmother wasn't his enemy, but she was very proud and rejected him, but gave him very good advice what to do. Okay, so translation, my dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother, Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshiping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, oftentimes in modern life, when there's the question of the several heirs to a throne, sometimes one of those persons kills the other person so that they're guaranteed to become the heir.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But here, it doesn't. It's not like that. They're getting good advice. The boys are getting good advice. The harsh words used by Suruchi to her stepson were true, because unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve any success in life. Man proposes, God disposes. Suniti, the mother of Dhruva, of Dhruva Maharaj, agreed with her co-wife, advice that Dhruva engage himself in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indirectly, the words of Suruchi were a benediction for Dhruva Maharaj, for because of the influence of his stepmother's words, he became a great devotee. Haribol.
Mm.
So there's always a silver lining in every tragedy. Mm. Suniti continued. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshiping his lotus feet, your great grandfather, Lord Brahma, acquired the necessary qualifications to create this universe. Although he is unborn and is the chief of all living creatures, he is situated in that exalted position because of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom even great yogis worship by controlling the mind and regulating the life air, prana. Purport. Suniti cited the example of Lord Brahma, who was Dhruva Maharaj's great grandfather. Although Lord Brahma is also a living being, by his penance and austerity, he acquired the exalted position of creator of this universe by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. To become successful in any attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities, but also must be dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is very important. So you have the demons that perform great penances and tapasya to be powerful and successful, but they'll be defeated. On the other hand, this advice that's being given to become successful in any attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities, but also must be dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's a very significant statement, because there are many examples, like Hiranyakashipu. He performed severe penances and austerities, but he did not like the Krishna. So he was not dependent on the mercy of Krishna. This indication had been given by Dhruva Maharaj by his stepmother and was now confirmed by his own mother, Suniti. So Dhruva is given very good counseling by his stepmother and his mother. Text 21. Suniti informed her son, your grandfather, Swayambhuva Manu, executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby with unflinching faith and devotion. He worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success in material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation, which is impossible to obtain by worshipping the demigods. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Now, this is very important purport, very, very important. The success of one's life is measured by one's material happiness in this life and liberation in the next. Such success can be achieved only by the grace of the Supreme Personality of God. The words Eka Matya mean concentrating, concentrating one's mind on the Lord without deviation. This process of undeviating worship of the Supreme Lord is also expressed in Bhagavad Gita as Ananyabhak, that which is impossible to obtain from any other source, is also mentioned here. Other source refers to worship of the demigods. It is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many demigods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal. See, now you understand why the Muslims are very powerful. They strictly worship one God. So, they say Wahad Allah. Wahad means only one God. But the Hindus, they worship many gods. That's why they're being defeated by the Muslims. So you have to be very careful, right? Yeah. There's got to be someone who can instruct people what is the real path to success in life. So what we're hearing here is the process of undeviating worship of the Supreme Lord is also expressed in Bhagavad Gita as Ananyabhak, that which is impossible to obtain from any other source, is also mentioned here. Other source refers to worship of the demigod. Well, that's what the Hindus are doing. They're worshiping, the demigods. They might be worshiping Krishna also, but they're also putting Krishna on the same level as the demigods. Yeah.
So Maharaj, this was the first correction I did for myself when I had started attending the classes in the temple.
Yeah.
Because from the childhood we were doing exactly like this.
Yeah.
Worshipping demigods and Krishna and Rama at the same level.
They're all equal.
And that was the first thing when I heard. I did the correction.
Good thing you did that. That's why you're hearing now. Otherwise, you'd be out there in la la land. So it says, the words eka matya mean concentrating one's mind on the Lord without deviation. This process of undeviating worship of the Supreme Lord is also expressed in Bhagavad Gita as Ananya Bhak, that which is impossible to obtain by any other source, is also mentioned here. Other source refers to worship of the demigods. It is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants, what it says here, one who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. The persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal. Now, see, this is why the Muslims are powerful. They only worship one God, although they don't really understand who that God is. But still, they're only worshiping one God. So, and they say, Wahad Allah, only one God. Wahad means one. And the Hindus, they're worshiping many gods. And they often equate all gods as being equal. And that is completely wrong. And that's why the Muslims, they hate Hindus. Because the Hindus do things that are considered anathema or very sacrilegious by Muslims, such as worshiping many gods and other things also. Those are completely forbidden in Islam. Also, having deities. In Islam, it's forbidden to make a form of God because they say that, they don't have information of what that form is. If they did, they would make the form of God, but they don't have the information in the Quran, so they're not allowed to try and speculate and make a form. So they're following rules. And because of that, they're powerful. The Hindus are not going to be able to defeat the Muslims. They have to change certain things that they're doing that are wrong. And one of them is to worship demigods. That's you don't have to worship the demigods. If you worship Radha and Krishna, or you worship Krishna or Rama, then you don't have to worship the demigods. Demigods will be pleased. Right? But this is why the Muslims, when they get into a majority, they'll start massacring Hindus. First of all, the Hindus do things that are absolutely forbidden in Islam. Making a deity is absolutely forbidden. So, but if the Hindus understood that, then they would worship Bhagavad Gita, because that's what the Muslims do. They worship one book, the Quran. So if the Hindus, instead of worshiping deities, if they worship the Bhagavad Gita, then they wouldn't be massacred by Muslims. The Muslims, when they see all the different deities in the temple, they get really upset, and they think that they'll go to heaven if they murder Hindus. So, I mean, it's the problem is that the sadhus or uh, the teachers of Hinduism don't understand these things, and they insist on worshiping demigods, and they're just making themselves targets to be massacred. So instead of worshiping demigods, if they just worship Bhagavad Gita, they would not be massacred by the Muslims. The Muslims would not have any reason to massacre them.
Right.
It's a very simple thing. It's not complicated.
Yeah. Because we are finding the common ground basically with the to settle down on the Muslim majority countries.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. Also, they worship one God. Wahad Allah. There's only one God. With the Hindus, by worshiping demigods, they're just opening themselves up to being massacred. Because for the Muslims, it's the worst thing in the world to have deities and to worship many gods. They have a right to murder if that they see that, and that's what they do. But the Hindus could live peacefully with the Muslims if they worship Bhagavad Gita and did not have deities, but they would worship the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna, right? And because that's what the Muslims do, they're worshiping the Quran, right? Pretty simple. It's not complicated, right? But people are so adamant, and then what happens? They get massacred. That means that Hindus are not smart. They're actually what you would call fanatics. If they use their brain to try and understand Islam, then they would adjust things so their own people would not be massacred, and people could live in harmony. The Muslims would not have any objection of Hindus who worship the Bhagavad Gita in the house, and did not have deities, or the deity is the Bhagavad Gita. Then they wouldn't, they would say, well, you're like us, we worship the Quran, you worship Bhagavad Gita, you're like us, It's pretty simple. It's not complicated. It's not, you don't have to be a rocket engineer to understand. But Hindus have never understood this. Now, if you take the Hare Krishna devotees, it's the same thing. If you're preaching in a Muslim country and you build a temple and you have, deities of Radha and Krishna and Lord Sita Ram and so forth, the Muslims are going to, at one point, massacre you because they can't, they can't like accept that because it's completely forbidden in Islam. But if you worship Bhagavad Gita, they're not going to say anything because that's what they do. Also, they worship one book, the Quran, and even better than that, the devotees could put Bhagavad Gita and Quran together and worship them, right? And then the Muslims would love them. They probably would come and worship with the Hindus at that point. It's not rocket engineering. It's simple, right? But no, people won't do that.
In that case, Maharaj, there is no reason for them to destroy anything because Quran is also there.
Yeah, they would come to the temple and bow down because the Quran is there next to the Bhagavad Gita.
But unfortunately, no one is taking even the first step to worship Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, like as a first step. Not
Hold on. The first step is you don't have the deities.
Right. no one is taking that step.
Yeah.
Even
You have Bhagavad Gita as your deity. If they did that, I mean, you see it, the Muslims have to massacre Hindus. Because the Hindus right away they put up, and the normal Hindus they put up, all the demigods also, which is really, completely unacceptable to the Muslims. Anyway, this this fact the sadhus or the leaders of Hinduism are misleading their people that live in Muslim countries. Now, if they were in the majority, all right, they can get away with it. But when the Muslims get their majority, they're going to massacre the Hindus. There's no doubt about it. And that's what's happened many times. Once the Muslims have the majority, they start massacring the Hindus. Okay. So, text 22. Anyway, there's a takeaway here. The words eka matya means concentrating one's mind on the Lord without deviation. This process of undeviating worship of the Supreme Lord is also expressed in Bhagavad Gita as ananya bhak, that which is impossible to obtain from any other source. Is also mentioned here. Other source refers to worship of the demigods. It is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. So even in ancient times, they understood that you should not worship demigods. So how this, demigod worship came into vogue, it became part of the culture of Hinduism is, I mean, it's wrong. It's just wrong. So Manu, he had undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life. So this demigod worship is a big mistake in Hinduism. Big, big mistake. And here it says, it's very clear, and we should put this on a big sign in our temple, One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life. Here it is. Yeah, well, okay, since we're in the United States and there's freedom of religion, well, when we have a temple, we put, Radha and Krishna, Sita and Ram, and we also have other deities. But if we're in a Muslim country, you shouldn't even have a deity. You should have the deity should be Bhagavad Gita, and there's nothing wrong with that. Bhagavad Gita is Krishna, so you're worshiping Krishna when you have Bhagavad Gita on the altar. If you go to a Muslim temple, There are no deities. There's just the Quran. If you go to a Jewish temple, there are no deities. There's just the Torah. You know what they do with the Torah? They hug the Torah and they start dancing with the Torah. uh, and, they dance, joyfully with the Torah in their arms. So, Islam and Judaism is very close. They're both Abrahamic religions. Okay. But here Prabhupada says, and this people should understand. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life. Now, see, if Hindus just understood this, they would not be massacred by Muslims. And here it says, one who diverts his mind to worshiping many demigods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. And there it is. This is right in Srimad Bhagavatam. But of course, nobody reads Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, they have, like everybody on the altar. Even here in Seattle, when someone gives a big donation to put someone on the altar, they do it. So you have Shiva, you have Brahma, you have Krishna, and you have Sai Baba, and this Baba, and that Baba. All you have to do is give a big donation to the temple, and they'll put Sai Baba on the altar, with all the other deities. Okay, so now we know what is the secret to living peacefully in the Muslim world. If you're a Hindu, you worship Bhagavad Gita. That's equal to worshiping Krishna, because Bhagavad Gita is non-different from Krishna. So you don't have to have a deity. The deity is the Bhagavad Gita. That would solve a lot of problems. That definitely would solve a lot of problems. And this is why the Sikhs don't have problems with the Muslims. They usually the Muslims don't massacre the Sikhs. Why? Because they don't have deities. That's why they don't worship deities. They worship their Granth Sahib. The Granth Sahib means their scriptures. And that was started by, what was his name?
Guru Nanak.
Guru Nanak, yeah. He was smart. He had traveled all through, the Muslim countries and all over the place. And he established that they should worship the Granth Sahib, their scriptures, instead of deities. Okay, well, I guess we'll stop there. Actually, let's see, there was, Guru Nanak, but even more significantly, there was, what's his name? Nanak and, I forget the name.
Guru Gobind Singh?
Yeah, Guru Gobind Singh. Yeah, he was very, very instrumental in learning how to live with the Muslims. he had what did he do? Well, they worshipped the Granth Sahib. That was the whole thing. Where now the Muslims could tolerate them because they do the same thing. They worship the Quran. So if you worship,
so that's the proof point.
What?
That is the proof point that by just worshipping the scripture, you would avoid this animosity with the Muslims.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Unless there's anybody has a question or a comment. Question or comment. Okay, the takeaway today. That which is impossible to attain by any other source is also mentioned here. Ananyabhak. That which is impossible to obtain from any other source is also mentioned here. Other source refers to worship of the demigods. It is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. In other words, Manu was not worshiping demigods. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. Hey, Hindus, you should all come here and hear this. You guys are all you're doing the wrong thing. And therefore it says, one who diverts his mind to worshiping many demigods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal. In other words, Krishna will satisfy the desires of everyone, right? Even if there's desires or material desires, it's okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay as long as you come to Krishna. But if you go to the demigods, it's not okay. And you will suffer by worshiping the demigods. So it is said here, it is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness in the transcendental service of the Lord. One who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence, meaning lacking intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord, meaning Krishna, without deviation. You'll have material happiness also. And you'll also be able to go back to Godhead. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life.
Yeah, this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.3.10. Akama sarvakamo va moksha
Kama udharadari. Yeah.
Tivrena bhakti yogena yajata purusham.
Haribol. Okay. Wisdom. This is real wisdom. If Hindus understood this, they would avoid being massacred in Muslim countries. Just imagine what's going to happen when the Muslims have more population than the Hindus in India. They're going to massacre the Hindus. Right now, there are a majority Hindus are in a majority in parts of India, but as soon as the Muslims have more population than the Hindus, they're going to massacre the Hindus. It's just a matter of time. And the Muslims, obviously, they can have 4 wives and they can have, 10, 20 kids. How long is it going to be before they outnumber the Hindus in India? By 2050, they will probably be equal or more than the Hindus. And that's when India is going to become a Muslim country. Okay, Hindus, you should come and hear our lectures and save yourselves from disaster by chanting Hare Krishna and hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And so our takeaway: one who diverts his mind to worshiping many gods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life. That's a very, very significant statement. In fact, we should print that and put that up, so anyone who walks into the temple can read that. Okay, so Prabhuji just left. I have to tell him to do that. He always prints things when I say print this out, put it up in the temple. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation. And persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram.